Imagine, standing at the edge of the ocean, the water is dark, cold, completely still, and somewhere beneath you, hundreds of feet down, there are streets, there are walls, there are doorways, buildings that haven't seen sunlight in thousands of years. Not ruins buried in sand, not shipwrecks, not myths from a history book. Cities. Real cities, with roads that once carried people, marketplaces where voices once echoed, temples where prayers were once whispered into the dark. And the world barely knows they exist. So here is the question that nobody asks out loud. If entire civilizations could be swallowed by the sea and forgotten, what does that say about everything we think we know? What does it say about us? The ocean covers 71% of this planet, and yet less than 20% of it has ever been mapped or explored. The surface of Mars has been charted more carefully than our own ocean floor. Think about that for a moment. We've spent billions sending cameras to distant planets, but the world beneath our own coastlines remains largely unknown. And in that darkness, in those unmapped depths, archaeologists have been making discoveries that rewrite the history of human civilization. Not piece by piece, but in sweeping, dramatic ways that challenge everything we thought we understood about how ancient people lived, how advanced they truly were, and how suddenly, how completely, entire worlds can disappear. These are not legends. These are not fairy tales dressed up as science. These are real places with real artifacts, real foundations, real architecture, cities that existed before recorded history even began. And the deeper researchers go, the more unsettling the story becomes. Off the western coast of India, in the Gulf of Kambat, the water is murky and shallow. Fishing boats have drifted over this stretch of sea for centuries. Nobody thought much about what lay below. Then, in the year 2001, a team of oceanographers was scanning the seafloor for pollution data. Routine work. Nothing unusual expected. Their sonar equipment began returning strange readings, geometrical shapes, symmetrical patterns, angles that don't exist in nature. When divers went down, what they found stopped the entire research team cold. Walls, grid-like streets, the remains of what appeared to be a massive urban settlement, stretching nearly 5 miles across the ocean floor. Artifacts were pulled to the surface. Stone tools, pottery, a piece of carved wood that was later carbon dated to approximately 9,500 years. That would make this city, the Gulf of Kambat structure, 5,000 years older than the earliest known civilization in recorded history. And historians barely mentioned it. No front-page stories, no major documentary series, no global headlines. It was noted, studied quietly. And then the conversation seemed to move on. Why? The Gulf of Kambat was not alone. Off the coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni, a local diver named Kihachiro Aratake stumbled onto something in 1986 that he could not explain. A structure of massive carved stone terraces, staircases, and platforms, some rising over 80 feet from the ocean floor. Clean right angles, deliberate geometry. A design so precise it seemed impossible for nature to have created it. The debate erupted immediately. Scientists split into two camps: those who believed it was a natural geological formation, and those who believed it was built, intentionally constructed by human hands. But here is what both sides quietly agreed on. Regardless of its origin, the Yonaguni monument has been underwater for at least 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, that entire region was dry land. And that's when researchers began asking a different kind of question. Not just who built this, but what happened to the people who were there when the water came? because the water didn't rise overnight. It was a process, slow at first, then rapid, catastrophic. The end of the last ice age unleashed a transformation so violent that entire coastlines vanished beneath the sea within a single human lifetime. Rivers turned into inlets, hills became islands, and every settlement built near the shore, every fishing village, every coastal city simply ceased to exist on the surface of the earth. Scientists estimate that during this period, roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago, global sea levels rose by more than 400 feet. 400 feet, entire continents of coastline gone. And we know almost nothing about who was living there. But then, something unexpected happened. In 2017, a research team diving off the coast of southern India, near the ancient city of Mahabalipuram, a site already famous for its carved stone temples, found something just beneath the surface. More structures, older structures, walls and platforms that matched no known historical period. And when they cross-referenced the local Tamil texts, ancient literature that historians had long considered mythology, they found descriptions of a great city swallowed by the sea, not a metaphor, not a poem, a historical account. The texts described 3 separate floods over thousands of years, each one consuming a great city of the Tamil people, each one driving the survivors inland, forcing them to rebuild, carrying their knowledge, their language, their culture forward into a new world. The public never heard the full story, but the real truth was far darker. Because if these accounts are accurate, if these cities are real, then the story of human civilization doesn't begin where we think it does. The standard historical timeline places the first complex human societies in Mesopotamia around 3,500 BCE. That's what most textbooks still say. That's what most of us were taught. But the structures beneath the Gulf of Kambat, the formations at Yonaguni, the submerged walls off Mahabalipuram, they predate that timeline by thousands of years. And they are not isolated cases. Off the coast of Cuba, in 2001, a team using sonar equipment discovered what appeared to be an enormous complex of geometric structures. Pyramids, roads, stone buildings, resting on the ocean floor at nearly 2,000 feet below sea level. The lead scientist said it was the most important discovery of her career. Further research was promised, and then funding dried up, interest faded. The site was never fully excavated. Hidden inside the research documents, however, was something quietly disturbing. The geometric regularity of the structures was estimated to be the product of a society with advanced engineering capability. A society that would have required thousands of years to develop, and they were gone completely, without a single line in any history book. Here is what we know for certain. During the last ice age, an enormous landmass that scientists now call Sundaland existed in what is today the South China Sea. It was larger than India. Millions of people almost certainly lived there. When the ice melted and the seas rose, Sundaland vanished entirely beneath the water. Today, that drowned world is called the Sunda Shelf, and if any civilization lived on that land, every trace of their cities, their temples, their stories would now be sitting on the ocean floor, in water too deep and too dark for most modern equipment to reach. We have been looking for the origins of human civilization on dry land, but the dry land we see today, it isn't the world that ancient humans knew. The world they knew is underwater. And honestly, if stories like this give you chills, if the idea that we may have forgotten entire chapters of our own history unsettles you, this channel was made for exactly that feeling. Subscribe, because the next story goes even deeper. There is something deeply human about the ocean. We fear it, we're drawn to it. We've built our greatest civilizations along its edges, always close to the water, always a little too close. Maybe, somewhere in that pull, there is a memory we can't explain, a collective echo of something we lost. Cities that held millions of lives, now silent beneath 100 feet of black water. Every time an archaeologist pulls a carved stone from the sea floor, every time a diver surfaces with something that shouldn't exist this deep, this old, the timeline shifts, the story changes, the question gets bigger. Who were they? What did they know? And what would we understand about ourselves? About where we truly came from, if we could finally read what they left behind? The ocean is not empty. It never was. It is a library, the oldest library on Earth, and most of its pages have never been opened. Before we found the cities, we didn't know they were missing. And the question that should keep you up tonight is how many others are still waiting down there, in the dark, in the silence, waiting to be remembered. But this mystery goes even deeper, and in the next documentary, we uncover the part that researchers refuse to say out loud.